6 o'clock, I call the meeting to order. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. DL chapter 38, section 18, and Governor Healy's March 29, 2023 revised order extending remote participation by all members in any meeting of a public body. This meeting of the select board will be conducted both in person and via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information, the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and our parties with a right and a requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website. This meeting, members of the public and committee members may attend the meeting in person, or for those who wish to do so remotely. For those who are not in person, every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. Pursuant to MGL 7C 30A, Section 20F, after notifying the chair of the public body, any person may make a video or audio recording of an open session of a meeting of a public body who may transmit the meeting through any medium. Beginning of the meeting, the chair shall inform other attendees of any such recording. This meeting is being recorded by the Berkshire Edge, Berkshire Eagle, and the town of Great Barrington, among others. Any member of the public wishing to speak at the meeting must receive permission of the chair. The listing of agenda items, those reasonably anticipated by the chair, which may be discussed at the meeting. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed. Other items not listed may be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by law. We do not need a roll call. We are all in person. Approval of minutes of March 6, 2023 and March 13, 2023. You have a motion.
I make a motion to approve minutes of March 6, 2023 and March 13th, 2023.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous. Select board's announcements, statements, Garfield,
Nothing.
Eric,
Nothing, thank you.
Ed, Lee.
Mark might be touching upon the Earth Day celebrations because I won't mention it.
Not tonight.
Okay, just so we have more publicity about Earth Day. Earth Day is coming up on Saturday, April 22nd, as everyone is aware of, and the town of Great Barrington is doing a townwide cleanup in Housatonic and Great Barrington. And there will be, there's more information on the website of townofgb.org. And there's going to be bags left out to pick up. Actually, there's some bags right now at various places. And we hope to see everyone there on Earth Day. Thank you.
Thanks, Lee. Nothing for me. Town manager's report.
Thanks, Steve. First on my list is the board of directors for the Southern Berkshire Veterans Service. Andy Morrow represented the town on the 12-town Southern Berkshire Veterans Committee. He resigned last month. He has for years. He resigned last month, and we recently received one letter of interest from James Bailey. That letter and a letter of support from Tom Gage were included in your packet for review over the weekend. Tom here.
Tom is over there.
Do you want to speak for this? Jim is also on the line.
Okay.
I'm Tom Gage. I'm chairman of the board of directors for the Veterans Services. And we're 12-town service, and due to Andy's resignation, we need a replacement for Andy immediately because we have a thing coming up next month. We have to hire a new director of services, which is Lori Hills. She's retiring at the end of June, but she's agreed to stay with us if we get the person in there for a month or two to acclimate with us. Before she was in there, we had everything on paper, and she's done a tremendous job of organizing everything and getting everything. But to make it short, we do need the town of Great Barrington represented. The 12 towns, I'd like to see everyone represented when we make this decision to hire a new person. That's I'm recommending James Bailey.
Can we do this tonight?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have a motion?
I make a motion to elect James Bailey to the board of directors of the South Berkshire Veterans Service.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Congratulations. And send our wishes to Andy. He's been terrific over the years.
Yes.
Next on my list is Housatonic Water Works, and as you know, we'll be meeting in executive session with our attorney at the conclusion of this public session, so I don't have any other news to report on that topic tonight. The next two topics were updates I was asked to provide at our last regular session. First up is the library construction grant. And there's a grant application available to us from the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners. It's a construction grant, and after meeting with staff that included staff from the library, we decided not to pursue this grant at this time for the following reasons. The first reason is that we've applied twice and we've been unsuccessful with our earlier applications. The second reason is that in order to apply for this grant or submit a letter of intent, we have to have a strategic plan and a financial plan in place, and we don't have either of those plans at the moment. We'd also be required to have $150,000 in planning and design funding set aside for this project, and we do not at the moment. Fourth reason is that the grant only covers 60% of the $5 million. So that would leave us on the hook for the remaining $2 million. And the fifth reason is that the grant is highly competitive and only 10 applications are being funded statewide. So we've identified as a staff the critical repairs that are needed at the Ramsdale Library, and we're working on those now. So those include the accessibility project that you're all well aware of, the boiler replacement, and the roof and electrical repairs. So the bottom line is we're just not well positioned at this time to be successful. So we're going to hold and discuss applying in the next round, which is probably 4 to 5 years from now. So that's that topic. And then the last topic on my list is the Housatonic School and an update on that process. The purchase and sale agreement was drafted and shared with the developer recently. It's being negotiated at this time between the developer and our attorney. And that agreement will clearly spell out each party's obligations, the timeline, the financing, and we're making progress, but it's not ready for review in executive session just yet. So we'll be back with that shortly. In the meantime, the developer is making progress. They're drafting site plans, detailed floor plans. They're locating all the underground utilities on the property and preparing for the permitting process. So we'll be coming back to you soon, but the transfer of ownership to the developer won't take place until we're ready, or they're ready to begin construction. So we have time. And that's all I have.
Thank you. The one license and permit has been withdrawn, and we'll move right on to the public hearing. So do I have a motion to reopen, to continue the public hearing?
So moved.
Roll call vote, Garfield.
Aye.
Eric.
Aye.
Ed. Lee.
Aye.
And I. Chris, you're there? So Chris, last time we went through in detail, I would say, starting with the introduction, we could just go through the major categories and see if the select board has any questions or comments about that. Okay, Davidson.
I have one before we get
Yeah.
to that. It's just was brought to our attention, one of the maps that was submitted, I think it's page 16 of the packet.
Yeah.
One of the site plans identifies the property just to the west of the airport as Daniel Bell. It should be, and it is Claudia Shapiro. That doesn't really have much impact on what we do. We just
Okay.
want to put that in the record.
Thank you.
As is typical for surveys, they often use the abbreviations NF, now or formerly. Ed, you're correct about your statement. That is the fact here, however, but that's the way surveyors often use that NF, now or formerly shorthand.
Great, thank you.
So Chris, you want to start with the introductions and just guide us through this in a more of a broad view?
Sure. What you have in your packet tonight is the finding statement from that you discussed last meeting. And it includes everything you discussed, the additions that Ed Abrams had suggested, And some comments also from town council, but we can just go through each section.
Yeah, and if everybody has comments on that section, any of the board members, yes.
What are we up to?
Well, we haven't started yet.
Okay.
Well, if there's not any,
Starting line.
are there
No
no,
better
com-
place to start than the introduction.
are there no comments on the introduction?
No,
Okay,
Not seeing.
general findings, anything?
Yes, I just want to make sure the page numbers line up. Page 3, paragraph 1.
just read them first.
Yeah, the select board has little control over flight operations per se.
Uh-huh.
But the applicant has volunteered some operations. I just would like to include, there's no objection. According to town council, the town's ability to enforce these conditions is unclear.
David, is that an accurate statement?
Take it after this.
Mr. Chairman, to the extent that there are statements or comments in the decision that might be inconsistent with the board's ultimate determination, that is whether to grant or not grant, I would recommend not including in the document a statement, if it is a grant that imposes conditions, a statement that questions the board's ability to enforce, because that could ultimately be decided by another body, either administrative or judicial. And I would not recommend acknowledging or agreeing to any limitation on the town's or the board's authority in the absence of some proceeding where that issue is formally joined. So short answer, I'd recommend that the town and the board prepare and issue a document that to the greatest extent possible reserves all of the town's and the board's rights.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess my question is, despite the fact that the minutes we just approved has 3 different examples of that, we shouldn't put it in the findings, is what you're saying, correct?
Did you hear him, David?
I didn't hear all of that. I'm sorry.
The minutes we just approved has at least 3 examples of you advising us we may not be able to enforce these, but despite that, we still shouldn't include it here. Is that correct?
I would agree. Yes, it's not
Okay.
necessary to include it, in my view.
Okay. Paragraph 3. One, two, is it, where it says in the middle of the paragraph, while leaded airplane fuel can be a source of air pollution, it is a source of air pollution. Could we change that?
I'm not sure there's any difference. I have no problem changing it. Anybody have any problem changing that?
No.
Garfield?
No.
Chris, did you get that change?
Yes.
Okay,
I have a change for paragraph 4 on page 4, paragraph 1 on the top. But I suspect it's the same answer. I'm gonna skip that.
okay,
But I'm good until conditions. Keep going.
okay, so Chris, I guess we're on C if you want to. Continue
Okay.
on C.
Anybody have any comments in C there? Findings in D? Finding 1, social, economic, community needs. 2,
That's it,
traffic
yeah.
flow and safety. 3, adequate utilities, adequacy of utilities. 4, neighborhood character. So what we did in 4, council and I tried to be a little bit more specific with regards to the master plan statement that is included there. Five impacts on the natural environment. You okay with the way the fuel tank leak alarm system statement is written there at the end of the paragraph, finding 5?
I am.
Yeah.
6, fiscal impact. And excuse me, into proposed conditions number 1.
Yes. No, sorry,
Was a yes and a no?
that was a no. One is,
You have something on one?
no.
Okay, anyone have anything on one? No, go ahead, Chris.
2, within 30 days, provide to the select board a list that reports the number of airplanes and other aircraft based or housed at the airport. That's not something you specifically discussed last time, but goes to, I think, some of your discussion, general discussion, trying to get to benchmarks and specificity.
Yeah.
3 is with regard to continuous takeoffs and landings in the summer from Memorial Day through Labor Day. And there is a placeholder there because we wanted the board to have a discussion about what the continuous aircraft traffic pattern of more than 4 takeoffs and landings in span of. We suggest you have a discussion there, maybe converse with the applicant and see how that should be fleshed out.
I got a question.
If I may add to that, Mr.
Yeah,
Chair, I
go-
think that
go ahead.
it would be appropriate. There was some discussion at the March 13 session about what continuous takeoff and landings might mean. And I think that should be, as Mr. Rumble stated, more fully explained by the applicant so that the board has it on the record. And then with that information can discuss a condition that it would find appropriate.
Eric?
So, yeah, I do want to touch on that also, but here, this is one of the first ones where we discuss an end time, but I believe we discussed a start time for the weekdays. And I guess I'm asking, should it be in this particular time frame as well in number 3? As far as starting at I believe it was 8 o'clock, I remember.
I think you're
throughout
right.
all seasons, and then stopping at 5 in between Memorial Day and Labor Day. And then 6 in the past, but I guess I'm wondering if we should be putting start time in this one.
Chris?
I do have a note about that as well, Eric, 8 a.m.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if it was. Yeah, I think it was for the Memorial Day to Labor Day question.
Mhm.
Okay, so that can be added in because that was agreed to. Go ahead, Ed.
Just the, for 3 continuous takeoffs and landings is not continuous. I mean, I would assume if you land and you don't park the plane and get out, it's continuous. If you land, go back around, take off again and land again. Why are we allowing 4 as an exemption? As opposed to just 4 as continuous?
We're limiting it to 4.
Right, I thought we had said no continuous takeoff and landings.
I think
I
that,
didn't know it was defined as 3 is not continuous.
no, I think that maybe Attorney Egan, I thought the reason that, and I let the attorney speak, is because part of flight schools is takeoff and landings. And we were just limiting the amount they can do. Yeah, go ahead.
The chair's correct that contiguous takeoffs and landings are only in the context of a flight school.
Right,
And it's normally for continuous takeoffs and landings.
So I guess, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this is saying that somebody after 5 PM can come in and land and take off 4 times after 5. Is
Yeah,
that, am I,
that would be the proposal.
that would be the proposal.
no, that wasn't how I understood what we're doing, but then we haven't limited it. They can't do 6 or 7 or 8, but,
For 5.
right?
Right, and so what's your proposal?
None. A continuous, well, how was it? No continuous takeoff or landings of aircraft, period. After 5 or after 5 PM. I thought that's what we were. Right, otherwise. It isn't, I mean, it's.
The applicant would agree to the 3 if there's an issue with the.
I think the question is the after 5 PM part.
Yeah.
I think what Ed is saying is that takeoff and landing should be limited to 8 AM to 5 PM from Memorial Day through Labor Day.
Right,
Any continuing takeoffs and landings in the context of the flight school, is that the question?
Yes.
I'm happy to discuss it with the applicant.
Yeah, no problem.
It appears if we wanted to, we should make this 5:15 or 5:30.
Yeah, well, let's see what their responses are. Right there. But if you look at 3.4, it doesn't match.
Through the chair, the applicant's fine with that.
Okay. So there'll be no, first the change will be there no continuous takeoff and landings after 5 PM from Memorial Day through Labor Day. So that's our definition of summer.
And that's in our schools, airplanes only, right? Flight school.
Flight school.
does anyone else do continuous takeoff and landings?
No, not sure.
Okay.
So could the board clarify what you would like condition 3 to state?
Let me try it and see if everyone agrees. During the summer from Memorial Day weekend through Labor Day weekend, there should be no continuous takeoffs and landings of aircraft after 5 PM. And then there shall be no flight school activity on Memorial Day or Independence Day.
And did you want to before 8 AM?
Yeah, well, that's a whole separate issue. My brain isn't strong enough right now to put both in at one go. But yes, the 8 AM should be in there from before 8 AM or after 5 PM. Everyone agree that's.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then would the last sentence remain? There shall be no flight school activities on Memorial Day or on Independence Day?
Correct.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. There's a question as to the actual to the July 4th. The legal observance of the holiday, not the.
Is there a difference?
If it falls on a Sunday,
Yeah, that's right.
Not further complicated, but I think it's important.
Yeah. What's everyone's preference?
I have none, but we should be clear.
Yeah. So if we want it to be on July 4th, we just, instead of writing Independence Day, just write July 4th. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's just do July 4th first.
Okay,
Okay, moving ahead.
So 4, do we need the start time also?
I think so.
Yes,
Okay. Five.
Yeah, the 5. On 5 here, I was thinking that we left with the run-ups after 7. I think we matched it to the other times as far as continuous flight school, so there wasn't any confusions. So it'd be 6 from that and 5 at the other. I believe that's what was discussed at past meetings. Yeah,
so 8 AM to 6 PM is what? you're-
yes.
Instead of 7 PM.
Yes,
Chair, just a quick clarification on that. Previous it was unnecessary, and just so we are perfectly clear, unnecessary versus necessary, hopefully this gets us in place. Necessary is as a last safety check before flying. That would be necessary, and unnecessary would be anything else. So I don't think we're talking about a prohibition on flying after 7. We're just talking about run-ups that aren't necessary.
Yeah, tied to like your mechanics, right? So this is if Sandy's taking off, that's okay.
so we should leave the word unnecessary in there to make it clear.
Okay.
Yeah, there should be no unnecessary run-ups.
Yeah.
But the necessary one should be allowed to go, yes.
Okay. 8 to 6.
Correct.
Next.
I have no comments.
On any, yes,
Item 9 was about gliders. The board did have a discussion that, if a glider had to land, that wouldn't be prohibited, but generally there won't be glider activity.
yeah, that seems correct.
David, were there others we would like the board to note?
Mr. Chair, the glider issue and the turbojet or jet issue, I believe, were both categories where there had been discussion at prior sessions about only in an emergency. And so I think you've addressed that with the gliders. It would probably be appropriate to have the applicant again put on the record what my understanding is, but just to have it confirmed for the board, and so that it's on the record that neither gliders nor jets nor turbojets are proposed or anticipated to be using the facility.
Through the chair, we would agree with that with respect to the glider is just important with respect to number 10. We're talking about turbojet aircraft and not turboprop. But yeah, the applicant is fine with that in the context, except in emergency.
We're including that with the glider as well, except for emergency.
Yeah, I think it's understood is what they're saying. It's their reading into the record now. So.
Okay.
Right, David, you're saying we don't need to put it except for emergency after either 9 or 10?
That's probably a question of refinements. In other words, technically, if there were an emergency and there were a landing, that would be a violation. And so board's preference on that.
So I'd like to see us put except for emergency in both of those.
I think
Yeah.
that should.
Yeah. Okay,
Absolutely.
thank you, Chris, if you can do that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And so 10 was also except for emergency landings?
Yes,
Can a jet of some type actually land there?
props for this, but whole different class. That's a propeller aircraft driven as opposed to what we normally think of as a jet aircraft. The answer is no.
So then we shouldn't put it on 10, we should just put it on the gliders.
No, I think we should put it on 10. I would just limit it to turbo jet as opposed to turboprop.
Well, it says turbojet. I don't see where it hurts to put it on there.
Just asking the question here, if a jet lands in an emergency, then what happens? Does it have to take off?
Good question.
Yes, probably, right?
Yes.
There's no other way to get it out of there.
Yes,
Well, I mean, it's a difference with the glider, right? There is another way to get a glider out,
you're right, but there's not with a jet.
right?
Yeah, I would say yes, Chris, is the answer.
So is adding the phrase except for emergency landings relevant at all on number 10?
I just can't imagine anyone's gonna say anything ever.
Well, they might not be as nice as us.
Oh, okay.
Doesn't hurt to put it in there.
So my question, I think Chris's question is, even in an emergency, could a jet or a turbojet land there in an absolute emergency?
And then could it take off?
And then could
Based on
it,
the size of the aircraft,
Right.
aircraft needs 4,000 feet of runway, you're moving good scale, that's what it is.
I guess the answer is yes, Chris, let's just put it in there.
Okay. Number 11 is about drones, and the council just sought to clarify this, that there may be times when a regulation requires a drone to be flown for inspection or some other purpose. So this captures the no drone flying except as required to be permitted by law or for government inspections.
I just have a clarifying question for David. We're putting in a number of conditions that counter to what's required by law, right? Anything we're doing about what's going on in the air. I just want to make sure that what's written here can't be interpreted as FAA controls that, not us, so it's required by law to allow it. Does the question make sense?
The law, as I understand it, and as the applicant has represented it, is that with respect to an airport, the use of drones at or from the facility is neither encouraged nor promoted. I attempted in this number to use language that was, one, as reported to the board at the last session, that there may be inspections by, I think it was DOT, that it was reported to use drones for inspection. And if there is some FAA or DOT requirement for a drone, that would be permitted here. I'm not aware, and if you want to ask the applicant again, whether there's any other situation in which a drone, as it's currently understood, could use the facility or would be permitted. I think the representation and understanding has been that it's not encouraged anyway, so that they wouldn't be looking to do it, but they could conceivably, for instance, be mandated by some other inspection besides Mass DOT Aeronautics to permit the use of a drone.
I guess my question is saying is required to be permitted by law as opposed to as required by law. I'm worried that the word permitted means that we are required to, if the FAA says we're required to permit it, like we are required to permit any other flights, it negates the fact that, I mean, right here, the others were saying they've agreed to it. Here, we're saying if we're required to permit it, we'll have to permit it. Does that make, I want to make sure this word.
I understand the question. The phrase there was intended to relate to the airport having to allow the use of, but the board could use simply the phrase as required by law, which I think would probably encompass that situation as well. I was trying to be a little more specific, but your wording I would be fine with for accomplishing the same purpose.
Anyone have a problem with taking out the words to be permitted? I'm not hearing any. Attorney Egan?
No, there's no objection.
Okay,
Okay, 12, parking. I think that was straightforward. 13 was additional outdoor lighting. Lights must be dark sky compliant, etc. Fourteen, waste oil, no questions last time, I think. Hazardous materials. 15. This is regarding the chapter 61 agricultural land area. And then adding the condition that the area shall remain as open space, not be used for the airport operations.
okay,
16 goes to soil testing for lead.
Yeah, I know you said it was unclear. In the minutes from the 16th, we said testing for the next 2 years, and if acceptable, then testing every 5. Is that not what everyone else remembers us doing?
yeah, I thought the last meeting we then changed it and just said 6 months and then 5.
Okay, if so,
Does anybody remember differently than that?
No.
Okay.
– 17 is the condition about the fuel tank leak alarm. Is about emergency response protocol.
The only clarification to the board, the alarm, the new add-on of software will provide an alert to airport personnel. And then per the protocol that was submitted, then that airport personnel will notify the fire department and as required, or if required, so state EPP. It's not want there to be any confusion that the alarms will go to airport personnel, and then they will follow the law, which requires a notice to the fire department, and if required, EPP.
That's how I understood it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had a question, just in terms of any kind of leaks. So I know obviously we're talking about the fuel tank, but if there was a leakage from a plane or something some other spill, how is that? What's the protocol for that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And through the chairman, we've been focused on the US Inc., but that spill protocol, leak protocol, applies to any hazardous materials. 310 CMR requires any hazardous materials on site to follow the protocol. So when you go through the protocol, it says if there's an alarm, that takes care of the alarm. If there's any other leak, you follow those same steps. You just skip the first one, which has to do with the tank. So that would be the protocol regardless of whether it was a leak from the tank or a spill or any other hazardous materials.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Chris.
19 goes to the airport, providing to the town the airport's policies for pilots. This is an addition that Ed brought up, I believe, last time, and we inserted here. Sorry.
Yeah, I think we're ready. Go ahead.
Okay. 20 is airport flight operations, including reports regarding takeoffs and landings submitted to the FAA, also be submitted to the town. And then 21 is with regards to safety incidents that are reported to the FAA, that the town is also notified. 22 goes, prohibits the expansion of the machine shop. Discusses the hazardous materials used there. And requires the applicant to submit a report detailing what is handled, type and volume of hazardous materials used there on an annual basis. '23 is your condition, which ties this permit specifically to the current ownership group. And I think it would be good just to confirm here that the ownership now resides with Berkshire Aviation Holdings, Inc., which is that slightly different than the applicant?
Through the chair, just a point of clarification, the deeded owner of the property is Berkshire Aviations, Inc. Was a name change filed with the Secretary of State, changing the legal name to Berkshire Aviation Holdings, Inc. So because the deed is into VAE, that's what was used for the filing. So through discussion, we're fine with that. Just the legal name currently on file with the Secretary of State is Berkshire Aviation Holdings, Inc., although the deed is into Berkshire Aviation Enterprises. It's one and the same from a legal perspective.
So I
And so-
would,
Go ahead.
go ahead, I'm sorry. Just a question, if it's given that it's a corporation that owns it, wouldn't somebody buy the corporation? According to this, they wouldn't be buying the airport. The airport would still be owned by the same corporation. If somebody could buy shares in the corporation or buy Rick out for 1%, then that wouldn't affect the permit.
Is that correct, David?
Mr. Chair, the language as presented would be with respect to the corporate entity that exists. I did not understand the prior exchange between the board and the applicant to go beyond that, but that's certainly something that the board could discuss if that's now a question.
Right, but I thought our concern was it's Rick Solon sitting here saying, I agree to these conditions. So we wanted to make sure someone else doesn't come along later saying, I never agreed to these conditions. That was,
So David, let me ask you this question. If Berkshire Aviation Enterprises is sold, is it the responsibility of the new owners to continue with the conditions of the special permit?
Yes, in my opinion, because it's the entity and any successor persons, if you will, that are filling offices within that entity would be subject to the restrictions on the corporation.
And that was our intent.
right,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yes, thank you, David.
And if the name were to change again, but the ownership structure remains the same, is that an issue that they'd have to come back and refile a special permit?
I would say that perhaps what we could do here is add a condition regarding notice if there's any change of name, which would simply be a change of name. And what was just stated a few minutes ago related only to that. Companies, corporations are permitted to change their name, but as was noted, the application was filed with respect to the name that appears in the deed to the property. And certainly it would be appropriate for the board to want to know if there are any future name changes. So I'd recommend that that condition be added as a separate item.
Everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ask my question again, just because I want to make sure?
Yeah.
Thank you. So again, Rick Solon is saying, he agrees to these conditions, and I think it was your opinion that we have a better chance if he changes his mind of holding them to that than a future owner. But what you're saying is he is speaking for this corporate entity, so anyone who buys this corporate entity is in effect buying his promise to us as well. And we have similar expectation of the conditions holding up in court.
The successor, if there were successor persons, as this condition is structured, it's only the named corporate entity that has the right to the special permit. So if there were other organizations or persons who wanted to operate in a separate manner under a separate structure, in my view, the special permit would not be something within their control. It has to stay within this corporate entity.
I think that's what you asked.
Yeah, and Rick is speaking for the corporate entity in perpetuity, if that was his promise, right? Even if he's not.
This it would be similar to, as an example, a corporation makes a commitment for a contract. And different persons may be in office at a future point in time, but it's the corporation that is obligated under the contract. And here it's the corporation that would be the recipient of the special permit. So the corporation continues as a legal entity, and that is the entity that is subject and remains subject to the special permit conditions.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on 23? 24, Chris.
Well, 24 may, Steve, maybe I'll ask council to go ahead and review the last ones. 24 may be this additional condition regarding future name change. Is that it?
This condition was with respect to the act
Oh,
of
I'm sorry.
acknowledging.
I was
Right.
going to add a new 25.
Yeah, it's a new one, that any change of the name of the recipient / applicant shall be reported to the board.
Okay.
So that would be the new 24.
Yes.
Okay. Got it.
And if I could ask David to review the next few.
So number 24 relates to questions that were asked at prior sessions, and that's essentially stating that by recording the special permit, that is also an acknowledgement and acceptance of the terms of the special permit and an agreement to be bound by the terms of that special permit. So that would become written notice both to the town and to the world, if you will, by recording at the registry that the applicant has agreed to and accepted the conditions. The next paragraph, which in your draft is number 25, relates to perhaps general questions that were asked throughout the hearings about certain elements of airport operations and the ability to quantify or provide reports. And this is essentially giving an annual report obligation with respect to the specific uses that have been discussed for this application, essentially how the special permit is being used for each year that it is in effect. And this also relates to the questions regarding takeoffs and landings, tracking of aircraft, flight path issues, and toxic and hazardous materials, so that the town and the board have a continuing written record of operations, because what has been presented to you is a request to approve the operations as they currently exist. And this is a way of monitoring and tracking from this point in time going forward.
Does that imply a limitation on the number of operations going forward?
This is an informational
Right.
tool, in my view, but it's an attempt to address the board's concern about being able to know, for example, in 2 years, well, what was actually happening in 2023. And so this is a way to have a form of an audit, if you will, so that there's information with respect to each year, and the town and board are able to compare to determine if, in fact, something is going beyond what this board intends to approve and what the elements of the special permit specify, as being approved if the board is to grant it.
Wouldn't we then have to have limits that we're comparing it to? I mean, we, at this point, we haven't limited flight operations, we haven't limited, other than the very small quantity generator requirements. We haven't limited waste, we haven't, right, so, I mean, this allows us to count it or ask them to count it, but it doesn't give us the ability to impose limits. Correct?
It's not a condition that is related to the imposition of limits, but rather a means of providing in as close a real-time manner as would be possible for an annual report, information that measures and reports on what's happening at the property.
Okay, thank you.
Number 26 addresses a question that Member Davis asked at the last session and perhaps even prior to that. That is, if there are changes in reporting requirements or technology that the board reserves the right to review what those are and require additional reporting. So the next number is the condition with respect to all of the conditions that are included if there is a grant are essential, and if one is invalidated, then the special permit would become void. In other words, all of these conditions are, as is stated in the board's view, essential to permit the special permit that you would be granting.
Thank you, David. Chris, do you have anything else you want to add?
I do not.
The board ready to close the public hearing?
I just want to ask, and I won't belabor this because I think I know the answer, if there's any interest from anyone else in imposing stronger limits to help mitigate some of the negative impacts on the neighbors. And if nobody's nodding yes, then we can.
I had one general question.
Yeah, go. Well, let's finish that first.
Oh, if we all.
Yeah.
Does anyone want to put stronger limitations? I'm not interested.
Okay.
I'm not saying any. Please go ahead.
I just wanted clarity, because a lot of these conditions are very nuanced. And I know there's a procedure for enforcement, and we have the building commissioner, so it's Edna right now. But, if we can just clarify if there are conditions that, say, neighbors feel that are not being met, that the citizens really know what happens, like, is it, and I know obviously we've had an airport here for many, many years, but because this, some of these things are just so detailed. And if, let's say, there's a neighbor that says, oh, well, they are doing this, or they doing that. Could I just get some clarity on, with all these conditions that we have proper enforcement and there is a way to go about if there's conditions or there's questions and concerns about the airport not meeting any of these conditions. So is that, I guess that's a question for
Whoever's willing to answer, Mark, Chris, or
Yeah.
David.
we have we have one person enforcing this and it's very, very detailed with all these conditions and I just want to make sure that there's a way to enforce that and.
At the moment, we have one zoning officer. We do have an assistant building inspector and zoning officer, but the position is vacant.
So what is the procedure then if there, and I'm not trying to start anything new, but I just for clarity, and since this is being discussed right now, what is the procedure if there's a grievance or there's a question on any of these conditions and
David, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe a complaint will be filed with the zoning enforcement officer, which was the beginning of this process.
Yeah.
originally.
and then they would just go through the check off the conditions.
Yes.
Okay.
You have the motions.
This. Packet.
Chris, are there motions in the packet?
No, your public hearing is open, Mr. Chairman,
So
still.
I'm about to close it. And then I would like us to have select board discussion and the vote on the findings and the special permit.
You want a motion to close the?
Yeah, unless someone, David, first or Mark, tell me otherwise, I don't see any reason to keep the public hearing open, so do you have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote, Garfield.
Aye.
Eric.
Aye.
Ed.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
And I, it's unanimous. Select board discussion. Ed, go ahead.
Yeah, I have something to, I can read it now or after the motion.
No, read it.
Okay. It's my opinion on the factors we're to consider. It take about 5 minutes and I apologize for the length. The applicant is one. The applicant has stated that this decision is about having an airport versus not having an airport. That if the town loses in court, it turns the clock back to 1932. That isn't correct. We're not deciding if there should or shouldn't be an airport in that location. We're deciding if the benefits of granting a permit outweighs the detriments. The airport's pre-existing non-conforming, so it can continue to be an airport with or without this permit. Everything that every speaker said they liked about the airport can continue with or without this permit. What can't continue without the permit is increasing the non-conformity. If we lose in court, we can still permit specific expansions of non-conforming use and buildings. If the court says no medevac, we could permit medevac. Without a permit, the town controls growth. With it, we are at the mercy of the courts upholding our issuing of conditions normally reserved for the FAA and the DOT. We saw this applicant install an underground gas tank on top of the water supply, despite the fact that our zoning doesn't allow underground tanks on the Water Quality Protection Overlay District. They were allowed to do it because it was the same size as the existing underground tank, not because it's a good idea to have an underground tank over an aquifer. The town should retain control over decisions about growth and change. Two, too many of our conditions are potentially unenforceable. According to our attorney, we may not be able to, and according to DOT, we can't enforce any conditions about the number of flights, flight operations, the type of aircraft, or the hours of operation. Even if these conditions are enforceable, the town doesn't have the staff or resources to enforce them. If any condition becomes unenforceable, we don't know that we can revoke the permit. If it's this board's opinion that the conditions are necessary to make the benefits outweigh the detriments, and if we can't be sure that we can enforce the conditions, and if we can't be sure that we can revoke the permit if conditions are voided, how do we say the benefits still outweigh the detriments? Three, the major complaint is noise, and we've done very little to address it. No information was provided by the applicant about how loud it is, nor how an increase in noise will be mitigated. And the applicant has stated they are unable to enforce the noise mitigating flight paths. Some conditions will help if we can enforce them, but not enough. Our conditions only offer minor adjustments to the hours that noise will be a nuisance. We're allowing continuous takeoff and landings. We're not going to go through that. Although we are even allowing a flight school to operate Christmas Day. That is something we could have given to the neighbors. We can't meet zoning bylaw 7.2.1.1, which says it shall be so located that it is not likely to become objectionable to adjoining or nearby property because the noise, traffic, or other objectionable condition. We've been asked to overrule town meeting and rewrite 7.2.1, which was approved by the Attorney General, so that it says more objectionable. Even if we have the authority to do that, the applicant doesn't know the current or recent air traffic volume, so can't say if it's increasing or decreasing, and didn't offer any evidence of either. Abutters and others living near the airport reported it has gotten busier in recent years. DOT in 2020 said they expected a slight increase in air traffic. How do we say it won't be more objectionable in the future if we don't know how busy it is or how busy it's likely to get? How do we say it won't be more objectionable in the future if we don't know how many aircraft are there, how many flights, or how many students are doing continuous takeoff and landings? How do we say it won't be more objectionable in the future if we don't know and can't place secure limits on operating hours, number of planes housed, types of aircraft, number or frequency of operations now, how much busier it has or hasn't gotten in recent years, and how busy it's likely to become in the future? How can we possibly ensure 7.2.1 given any interpretation of it? In 2020, we denied 7.2.1 because even a little increase in use would make the airport more objectionable to neighbors. It's gotten busier since then. Unless the applicant is offering evidence that the use, noise, traffic, etc. won't grow, how do we grant this permit? They didn't provide evidence that it won't get more objectionable. 5, we are being told the Water Quality Protection Overlay District doesn't apply, but the risks of toxic substances above our water supply is an issue that we can and should consider with respect to other relevant zoning bylaws. The 2003 SWAP report says the airport's the biggest threat to the water supply. That's a huge negative. Other than, quote, we'll keep doing what we've been doing, the applicant hasn't told us how they will keep our water safe. If we grant this permit, we do so without knowledge, without knowing if there is sufficient liability insurance in case of a disaster, without knowing if there are proper protocols in place for water protection or if the town has the ability to police those protocols, without knowing what hazardous materials are being used, whether any of them are included in the state's list of 600 or so prohibited substances, without knowing how much hazardous waste is stored or disposed each month, and without taking into account the environmental concerns, not just water, but air and noise pollution and fossil fuel use, which will only get worse with growth. 6, the application was incomplete. We weren't told and we don't know existing land uses, how much and where is the Chapter 61A land, location of wells within 400 feet of the lot line, complete list of hazardous materials, including storage and disposal method, correct description of open space. If we approve this permit, we're doing so not really knowing how much open space we're talking about. 7, no numbers were provided to back up the claim of a positive economic impact. How many visitors to Great Barrington are staying for how many days, spending how much money? Even if there is currently a positive economic impact, if the airport doesn't get substantially busier with this permit than it is now, how will awarding this permit increase the positive impact? Finally, what has changed since 2020? There's a quote from the 2020 findings. Quote, with the exception of the proposed hangar buildings, the applicant does not propose to alter the character of the site, nor does it seek to substantially expand the airport use or operations. From the 2023 application, quote, other than the hangars, to be clear, this application contemplates the continued existence of the airport as currently constituted. The applicant does not propose any new construction or other expansion of the current conforming use. In our 2020 decision denying the special permit, we found that the benefits of the proposal do not outweigh the proposed detriments. I won't list all the detriments we found, but the vast majority of them had nothing to do with the hangars. I feel like we've missed an opportunity to actually negotiate and talk to people of various points of view here. We've only been speaking with the airport when coming up with the conditions. And it seems like we could have reached for a compromise. An airport in a residential neighborhood is a delicate balance. I think we could have done more. Thanks.
So I'll respond to all everyone's gathering the thoughts. Ed, I will, my last breath, defend your right to your opinion. I will never agree with your opinion on this, but I will defend your right to it, and I respect what you put down. I think by our findings and conditions, we've done a really good job, and I think that this is a very slippery slope. There's no right answer here, but I respect your opinion. I think almost all what you have said, I just don't agree with this, but that's okay.
I am humble enough to note that on a 4-to-1 vote, I could be.
Maybe for it, may not be.
Okay.
Anyone else before we go? Chris, do you have a formal motion?
Well, I think your first motion would be regarding the findings of fact as presented to you and amended tonight during the session. And it would be a motion to either, to move forward, you would need a motion to approve the findings of fact as amended.
Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, if
Yeah,
I
go
may, I lost my connection for a moment of time. Is there a vote on the record to close the public hearing at this point?
We did close the public hearing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for keeping me honest. Yeah, a motion.
I make a motion to approve the findings of fact as amended.
Second. It's a discussion. Roll call vote, Garfield.
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
Ed,
No.
Lee,
Aye.
and I. Next motion.
It would be a motion along the lines of, in view of the approved findings of fact, probably to grant the special permit with the conditions enumerated in the approved findings.
If I may, Mr. I
Yes,
would add to that, or perhaps just revise it to say, the motion would be to grant a special permit with the conditions identified in the draft that is reviewed, and to direct the planning director to provide a final document to the board incorporating any of the amendments that were made tonight for the board's signature.
Almost
Can I
made.
send?
Can we just say so moved on that, David?
Yes, if you refer to what I said and someone's
Yeah.
moved it, that's
Okay.
appropriate.
I would like to make a motion to refer to what Attorney Dineski has said.
A second. Discussion.
Sorry, who was the second?
That was Ed.
Thank you.
Seeing no discussion, Garfield. Eric.
Aye.
Ed.
Aye. Oh, no, I'm sorry.
You really had me going there for a minute. I didn't think I was that persuasive. It'd be a no.
No.
Lee.
Aye.
And I, it passes on a 4-1. Both votes are 4-1. We are moving on to new business. So there were 73 virtual attendees at the most at this meeting, plus a room full of people. The room was completely full. And I would ask people just to file and close the doors, and if you're not staying.
I thought they were here to see it.
Yeah, correct. Can you just get? Yeah. Plus I have to get up again. Yeah, but you're fine. You know, we don't have to use it with Kevin, it's your choice. Yes, you could say we're not calling it.
Please, please.
Well, someone has their hand up, who's there? I'm thinking there's citizens. Yes. Okay, next, under new business, vote to appoint an alternate member to the Agricultural Commission. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion to appoint the alternate member to the Agricultural Commission, Ambrose Clausen.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Ambrose.
I don't see any online. No, I haven't seen it. No. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Mark, finalize the town meeting warrant.
Okay, so you have a copy of the draft annual town meeting warrant in your packet, and so you had a chance to review it over the weekend. It was approved by our attorney, David Vineski. And we're happy to answer any questions you have. If you have any. I just want to point out before we move into the warrant, the Finance Committee voted to remove Article 19, authorizing an additional $150,000 in temporary relief funding for Housatonic Waterworks customers last Tuesday. And that was due to the fact that we were able to secure the full $250,000 in Housatonic Waterworks funding from the state. So I'm going to ask the board to consider the same.
So I could do one of two things. If there are no questions, we could just have a motion to finalize the annual town meeting warrant, omitting article number 19. Or we could do it as a separate. Well, don't have any big stuff on, so I think we could do this as one motion.
Okay, I make a motion to finalize the town meeting.
I do have,
Oh.
can I ask a question?
Yeah, let's have the motion in second, then you can ask.
Okay, thank you.
I make a motion to finalize the town meeting warrant with omitting article number 19.
Second. Go ahead.
So yeah, I just had one question, and I think it's probably for Chris, and it's just on Article 27. And yeah, I guess I didn't get to see the last meeting, but I was curious about the funding for A-Lander and affordable housing. But I don't see it here, so I guess.
Yep.
So I guess I was just confused there. I see there's one for historic preservation. But I thought I read it in one of our newspapers that there was something for A-Lander in one of their developments in town for 2 units.
There is. Thanks, Eric. Steve, can I go ahead?
Yeah, please do.
So the Community Preservation Committee met last week, so it was really maybe not in time to have this included in your draft, or at least the draft that council saw. So there is an additional CPA project that the committee has recommended in Article 27. It will be the third one under affordable housing, and it will be for A-Lander Group for housing at 322 Main Street. The appropriation would be $250,000. So the total subtotal affordable housing would be 665,000. And the grand total would be 1,170,000. So there are a total of 9 projects, not 8.
So I'm sorry, just one more time. So number 3 under affordable housing would be for 322 Main Street at 255. Is that what you said?
250.
250. So just one unit or whatever that number breaks down.
One project recommendation.
One project right at 250.
That's for 2
Okay.
units. That's for 2 units.
Okay.
So those are the 9 projects and the total amount recommended by the CPC.
So can we withdraw the motion and the second?
Yes.
Because I didn't see that. either. Thank you. Can I have a motion to finalize the town meeting warrant as amended this evening and omitting number 19, the temporary Housatonic Waterworks related? Second. Okay. Does that work, Chris?
Thank you.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
Thank you.
Okay, National Grid petition request to install a sole ownership pole on South Main Street, beginning at a point approximately 165 feet north of the center line, the intersection of South Reed, and continuing approximately 50 feet in a north direction. Install one utility pole within the right of way. New utility pole will provide electric service for proposed electric vehicle charging station within Guido's parking lot.
I'm gonna recuse myself from this, Steve.
All those words electrical.
Yes.
Do you have anything you want to add or?
I mostly just have a question about this petition tonight.
Yes,
We were under the impression that we'd be seeing for a full petition on Seacomp Road, not this one here on South Main Street. I think we're supposed to do South Main Street on the 24th.
well, here's the problem, and I know nothing about that. Here's what's on the agenda is what I have to take because of the open meeting law. So I apologize for that. The only thing I can tell you is that on the next meeting, I will take you first and move you ahead, some sort of help, if I don't like earlier, but I can't change what's on the agenda.
Okay, so I guess my question was if you wanted to still hear this or not. If that-
Yeah, well, we might as well approve it, I assume we're going to, and that way, it's one less thing you have to do at the next meeting, is that okay?
That sounds good to me.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what was the street?
Seccong Road.
I actually have the forms and stuff that was gonna be submitted with National Grid, if it was, because,
And I hope this doesn't really mess up your project, but.
no, this was just a continuation of the one that we were here a couple of weeks ago.
Right,
It was just the stub pole going across the street.
well, I apologize for the confusion.
So it was just one pole going in, for an angle going here.
Okay, can you leave this with us? Is this our copy?
Yeah,
So that way you have it, Mark, so that
Yeah.
if there's any questions, we have it.
Yeah, I can leave that with you.
Okay, and it will be on the next agenda.
Okay.
So do I have a motion to approve this one?
I have a motion to approve
As on the agenda.
as on the agenda, should I say the whole thing?
This, just now.
Okay, as on the agenda.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor? So it's 4-0. And I apologize for the confusion. Thank you very much. That one's been approved. You're ahead of schedule on that one. Okay, electrical aggregation, authorize town manager to sign a contract on behalf of select board for the term beginning November 1st, 2023. Mark, go right ahead.
Okay, so as you know, we're currently in a one-year contract for electrical aggregation. That contract will be expiring in November, on November 1st. Our current rate is about 22 cents a kilowatt hour compared to the national grid rate of 33 cents. A number of Berkshire County cities and towns will be coming to the end of their three-year contract at the same time. So in order to take advantage of that buying power that comes with joining up with this much larger group in Berkshire County, I'd like to ask the board to authorize me to sign on your behalf an agreement on April 12th. So we'll receive updated funding tomorrow. Estimates tomorrow, and then we'll be able to meet as a group and execute a new contract on the 12th. So at that time, we'd select the supplier and the term. And just to give you a sense for how large this group is, it includes North Adams, Pittsfield, Adams, Williamstown, Lennox, Dalton, Lanesboro, New Marlboro, Monterey, West Stockbridge, Cheshire, Florida, Beckett, Sheffield, Clarksburg.
So it's advantageous to us to be in a larger group.
Correct, and we'd be tracking with them for our renewal contracts, and the terms are generally somewhere between 6 months and 3 years, and I can't say right now where we'll land, we haven't had that conversation yet, but this will put us in a much better position going forward for electric rates.
Is this new or is this something that has been done before and we're just joining this group?
We've just been tracking differently than most of our neighboring communities, so we're off by 1 year, but because we signed a
Yeah.
contract,
Now
we're
we can
now
Okay.
tracking with them, so.
Mark, it's possible to have that conversation first. You said you don't know whether or not we're gonna be 6 months or 3 months.
So we'll be discussing that as a Berkshire County group. But only one representative can participate in that meeting, so I can't bring those numbers back to you because the market closes on the 11th. On the 12th, and we have to make it, and we have to come to an agreement by 3 p.m. that day. So it's not something I can come back to this board and seek permission for, which is what we did last time because it was just us, but
Yeah.
in this case, it's.
There's some precedent for this as far as Berkshire Health Group insurance rates. We have a representative who votes, they don't come back to us with what that is going to be. So it's not unprecedented.
So Mark, I just had a question. So we're completely confident this will get a better rate by being part of this larger group rather than being a sole, on our own and being nimble.
Definitely we'll get a better rate than we have.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering, are we gonna be more nimble if we were on our own rather than with a big group, is there gonna be more?
I mean, the market changes every day. I don't think that we'll be in a better position to secure a better rate on it.
And how long is the contract?
It's anywhere from 6 months to 3 years. And
Oh, so we don't know that yet.
on the term and the supplier.
I'm very.
So you're gonna be negotiating, like you'll be sitting at the table, I'll be, okay.
Yeah, we met by Zoom last week. And the rates were looking. Without getting the details, much better than our current rate at the time. But again, a week has passed, but I don't think anything has fluctuated significantly in the market since then.
So if this isn't gonna be a better deal, why are we doing
It will be,
it? Because it sounds like you can't determine whether or not it is.
We just don't know for sure, but he's saying that as a group, you're confident it will be. We just don't know what that rate will be.
Because we have larger buying powers. That's all it is here.
So,
So do you have a motion to authorize the town manager to sign a contract on behalf of the select board for the term beginning November 1st, 2023?
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you.
and I can bring that information back to you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, citizens speak tonight.
oh, they are.
Claudia, go right ahead. Yeah, just come to the podium. You'll be next. Yeah, just, you can come on. No, whoever gets there first. Claudia, you're.
Yeah, can you
unmuted.
hear
Go
me?
right ahead. Yes, we can.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that Rick Solon had stated on the record in 2017 that he'd been trying to do this since 2008. So maybe that's going to unfold. But what I really wanted to say, Mr. Bannon, was I heard you mention the faith in relation to Ed Domini's father, and that may be correct, but the real mensch is Selectman Abrahams. Yeah, and I thank you, Ed. Thanks.
Thanks, Claudia. Whoever wants to speak, just come on up. You have 3 minutes. State your name and address, please.
Nancy McConnell, 19 State Road, Great Barrington. So on March 27th, Chris Rimbold, Great Barrington Town Planner, Assistant Manager represented the town of Great Barrington at the Housatonic Western River Committee meeting. In that meeting, there was an agenda item titled Approval of Expenditure of Funds. That was a placeholder for the committee's hidden agenda, voting to use public funds to pay attorney's fees to the legal team representing the Western River Committee to make oral arguments in the interest of moving forward with GE's Berkshire's toxic dump and undermining the U.S. First Circuit Court of Appeals case brought by two Berkshire's environmental organizations, the Housatonic River Initiative and the Housatonic Environmental Action League. Please tell the public, were the Great Barrington Select Board members consulted or informed Chris Rimbold before he voted in favor of paying for the Western River Committee attorneys to make oral arguments in favor of the permit for the toxic dump with public funds to undermine two of our leading Berkshire environmental organizations? Do you agree that the town of Great Barrington should be intervening into the U.S. First Circuit Court of Appeals case brought by the Housatonic River Initiative and the Housatonic Environmental Action League against GE to undermine their court case in favor of aiding GE, the polluter of the Housatonic River? And why is it in the interest of the town of Great Barrington to make it easier to have tens of thousands of toxin-filled dump trucks rolling through Great Barrington streets for up to 15 years, hauling PCB chemicals to the Berkshire toxic dump? That dump will sit alongside the Housatonic River on top of aquifers and is less than 2 miles away from thickly settled residential neighborhoods, businesses, and Lennox Memorial Middle and High School and the Montessori School of the Berkshires. I know many Great Barrington families send their children to that school. Is it in the town's best interest to put those children's health at risk?
Thank you very much. We don't answer questions at citizens speak on the agenda. I will give Ed a very brief chance because he
Yeah,
quoted as saying something that maybe was incorrect.
I can't say much because it was an executive session, so if there's, and the reason we don't normally engage in discussion is because it's not on the agenda. So we're not supposed to. I just want to clarify that, because I've been not necessarily misquoted, but the board met an executive session, I believe, in 2020 and not since. And we authorized the, all 5 towns signed on to the agreement. And we authorized Chris to represent the town for the agreement. So he didn't do anything he wasn't authorized to do. We haven't met or discussed it since. We haven't been asked to reconsider it since.
Thank you. Jim Bailey, go ahead. You can come next. Give me next.
Yeah, first I'd like to thank you all for allowing me the opportunity to serve our veteran community. I think it's very important, and I won't let you guys down. I have been a member of the Housatonic VFW Post 8183 since my discharge in 1994. I've done all I can to support veterans in various ways. I just think it's very important that we consider, the men and women who are all too often forgotten, overlooked. So I really do appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. We appreciate your.
Thank you for stepping up.
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Jim. Okay, go right ahead. Name and address.
My name is Holly Hardman. I live at 29 Summer Street. I moved back to the Berkshires in 2004. At that time, because of my interest in the environment and my memories of friends losing relatives to GEs, dumping of PCBs, I wanted to learn about any progress with the river cleanup. I was introduced to Housatonic River Initiative and the advocacy on behalf of the river by Tim Gray. For years, I have seen him as the leading advocate for the river's health and hopes for PCB cleanup. I moved from Williamstown to Great Barrington in 2018. In early 2020, I, along with others, was alerted to a proposed dump for the removal of PCBs. I went to a meeting at Monument Mountain High School. At that point, I caught wind that the plan was not great, but I didn't know how good or bad it actually was. I had a quick awakening. It's baffling. The GE design poses real risks, yet it is my understanding that this plan doesn't even get rid of more than 40 to 60% of the river's PCB load. Since that meeting in 2020, I have watched elected officials, regional appointees, and Rested River committee members ignore the knowledge that Tim Gray and the experts he has consulted with have tried to bring to the table. We are hearing of secret meetings and agreements that do not appear to reflect the will of the people. That is certainly the case with the town of Lee, as the town voted to rescind the GE toxic dump agreement. As a board, we seem to be ignoring valuable information that would be in the best interest of Great Barrington and our region about safer, more effective alternative technologies for PCB remediation. Let's join Lee. Let's set in motion a plan to rescind this reckless plan, this toxic dump in our midst. Accidents happen often and with devastating effect. Please do not ignore these risks.
Thank you very much. Thank you. See no one else, citizens speak. Select board time, Garfield. Eric.
Nothing, thank you.
Ed, nothing. Lee?
Yeah.
And I have nothing. Media time. Seeing nothing. We have a couple motions. One, to go into executive session under MGL chapter 38, section 21A for the following purpose. Number 6, consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real estate. The chair will declare that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body. Can I have a motion?
Can I say to move I move that the board meet in executive session pursuant to MGL chapter 30A, section 21A for the following purpose. 6, to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real estate regarding Housatonic Waterworks, because an open discussion may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body.
You have a second? Roll call vote, Garfield.
Aye.
Eric.
Aye.
Ed.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
And that votes unanimous. The next one is to go into executive session under MGL chapter 38, section 21A for the following purpose. Number 7, to comply with or act under the authority of any general or special law or federal grant and aid requirements. Motion, please.
I move that the board meet in executive session pursuant to MGL chapter 38, section 21, to approve executive session minutes from the following meeting, October 3rd, 2022.
Second.
Roll call vote, Garfield.
Aye.
Eric.
Aye.
Ed.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
And both of these are not to return to open session. We will not return to open session. Thank you, everyone.